All right, let's dive into something pretty important, I think. Reaching net zero in commercial property, using an ebook as our guide today, called A Roadmap to Net Zero for Commercial Property. And it's by CIM, a company all about building analytics software. So, what are we doing today? We're going to unpack this roadmap, give you some practical knowledge that you can actually put to work.
It is a great roadmap. And you might be surprised by some of what you learn here. Like, did you know 80% of the buildings that will be in use in 2050 are already built?
Wow. No kidding. So we can't just rely on brand new super efficient buildings then.
Exactly. We need to get serious about retrofitting what we already have. And that is where this 5-step plan from CIM comes in. It's all about turning those buildings into lean, green, sustainable machines.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with this 5-step plan. Where do we even start?
Well, the UN has called climate change a code red for humanity. So, action is needed urgently. But alongside that urgency, there's a ton of positive momentum building as well. Like big players in the property world. Companies like Equinix, CBRE, JLL, even Lendlease here in Australia, all making serious commitments to reach net zero.
So it sounds like the property sector is finally waking up to both the challenge
Yeah,
and the opportunity.
absolutely. And CIM's roadmap starts with a solid foundation. They call it Monitor, harnessing the power of data.
Data is king, huh?
You got it. Can't manage what we don't measure, right? It's like trying to navigate a city without a map. You need data to guide you.
So tell me more about the data.
Well, think about things like occupancy patterns. When are people using the building? Are there times when you could, dial back the lighting or the HVAC? You also want to look at the performance of your equipment. Are your chillers running efficiently? Is there any kind of unusual energy consumption that might be a sign of a problem?
Like giving the whole building a full health checkup?
Exactly. And one of the most important things this data shows is what's called energy drift.
Energy drift. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that term.
It's a pretty simple concept, really. Buildings naturally become less efficient over time, kind of like a slow leak in a tire. Systems get out of whack a little bit, controls might be miscalibrated, and all these inefficiencies just add up.
So even if a building starts out as energy efficient, it can still become an energy hog if we don't watch it carefully.
Yeah, unfortunately. In fact, buildings can lose 10 to 30% of their efficiency every 1 to 2 years because of this energy drift.
Wow, that's significant. So how do we plug these energy leaks? Is that where digitization comes in?
Absolutely. This is where things like sensors, smart meters, building analytics platforms, those become essential. They give you that real-time visibility into what's happening so you can find those inefficiencies and fix them before they become big problems.
It's like having a whole team of tiny energy detectives constantly patrolling the building.
I like that analogy. And that leads us right into CIM's second step in their roadmap, optimize. So you've got the data coming in. Now you can start fine-tuning your building systems. Squeeze out every last bit of efficiency.
Working smarter, not harder. I like it. So, what are some specific examples of this optimization? What kind of quick wins can property owners get?
Well, even something as simple as adjusting temperature set points can make a big difference. Like, do you really need to keep the whole building at a constant 72 degrees? When it's empty overnight, maybe you can nudge it up or down a few degrees during those off-peak hours.
Makes sense.
What else? Motion sensors are another great one. You know those lights in conference rooms and hallways
Yeah.
that are always left on, even when no one's around. Motion sensors can take care of that automatically, save energy and money. And then, of course, you've got the HVAC system, often the biggest energy hog in the entire building.
Right. I've heard HVAC can be over half of a building's energy consumption. That's huge. What can we do to optimize these systems?
There are a lot of strategies, but one of the biggest ones is making sure your HVAC systems aren't fighting each other, for example. You don't want the heating running in one part of the building while the AC is blasting in another part. That's just wasted energy.
Right. Like having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time.
Exactly. And these are just a few examples of how optimization can really make a difference. The key is use the data you gathered in that first monitor step to find the areas where you can have the biggest impact.
So, we've monitored our energy use.
Yeah.
And optimized everything. Squeezed out all the efficiency we can. Now what?
Now it's time to think about some upgrades. This is step 3. Upgrade and electrify.
So we've fine-tuned what we have, but now we're talking about replacing old equipment.
Exactly.
What kind of upgrades?
Well, we're talking about swapping out outdated equipment, systems that are past their prime, and the key word here is electrify.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Ditching the fossil fuels. Embracing the electric revolution.
You got it. Think heat pumps instead of those old gas boilers.
Oh,
LED lighting to replace those energy-hogging incandescent bulbs. And smart meters to give you more info about your energy use.
wait, hold on. Heat pumps. I thought those were just for swimming pools.
Nope. Heat pump technology has come a long way. They can heat and cool entire buildings now, and they're super efficient.
Really?
Yeah. CIM actually quotes Davina Rooney, the CEO of the Green Building Council Australia. She says, gas is responsible for almost 30% of building energy consumption in Australia. So eliminating gas from our buildings would make a material difference in a short space of time.
30%. That's a lot.
It is. Switching to electric heat pumps could make a big impact.
For sure. So we've got heat pumps, LEDs, smart meters. What other upgrades are out there?
Oh, tons. Some buildings are even using things like cooling paint that reflects solar radiation to keep the building cooler naturally.
Cooling paint. That sounds like science fiction.
I know, right? But it's a real thing, and it can actually make a difference, especially in warmer climates.
Okay, I'm definitely curious about this cooling paint now, but let's move on to step 4. We've monitored, optimized, upgraded. What's next?
Renewable energy.
Okay, let's talk about solar panels and wind turbines.
Exactly. CIM highlights two main approaches here, on-site and off-site.
So on-site, that's like a big shopping center with a huge solar array on the roof.
Exactly. Generating clean energy right there on your property.
And off-site.
Think about an office building in a city center. Not much room for solar panels there. They could sign a power purchase agreement, a PPA, with a wind farm outside the city.
A PPA, what's that?
Basically, it's a contract where a building agrees to buy electricity from a renewable energy project, like a wind or solar farm, for a certain amount of time.
Okay, that makes sense. So lots of options for renewable energy.
Yeah.
But how do you choose the right one?
It depends on a lot of factors, like the location, the building's energy needs, and the budget. CIM has a table from CBRE in their eBook. It summarizes different clean energy sources and talks about the pros and cons of each.
Oh, cool. Like a cheat sheet.
Exactly.
So what kind of renewable options are there?
They cover everything from solar and wind to geothermal and even biomass.
Wow. That's a lot to choose from. Before we get carried away talking about all this cool tech, why is it so important to do those first two steps, monitoring and optimization, before jumping into renewables?
Good question. You wouldn't want to install these fancy solar panels on a building that's wasting a ton of energy.
Right, of course.
By optimizing your energy use first, you're reducing the amount of renewable energy you even need, which can save you money.
Smart. Okay, we're almost done with our roadmap to net zero. Step 5.
Carbon offsets. This is where things get a little more complicated and maybe a bit controversial.
Carbon offsets. I've heard that term, but I'm not really sure what they are.
Okay, so basically, carbon offsets are a way to compensate for emissions that you just can't get rid of directly. So let's say you've done everything you can, optimized your systems, upgraded to more efficient equipment, maybe even put in some solar panels, but you still have some emissions, maybe from employee commutes or certain building materials.
Okay, so it's like balancing things out, neutralizing those last bits of emissions.
Exactly. You figure out how much you're still emitting, and then you invest in projects that remove an equal amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Okay, so what kind of projects are we talking about here?
Well, there are a bunch of different types, like reforestation, planting trees to absorb CO2, or renewable energy projects in developing countries, maybe building wind farms or solar power plants. And then there are projects that capture methane from landfills or farms and turned it into energy.
Sounds pretty straightforward. But CIM seems a little hesitant about carbon offsets. What's the problem?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is making sure these offset projects are actually legit, that they're really reducing emissions like they say they are. There's a lot of debate about how to make sure these projects are effective and prevent greenwashing.
Greenwashing?
Yeah, when companies use offsets to look good without actually reducing their own emissions.
Some of these projects might be more talk than action.
Unfortunately, yeah. That's why it's super important to do your research and only invest in programs with really high standards for verification and monitoring.
Right. CIM also mentioned that offsets can get expensive.
Yeah. The price goes up and down based on supply and demand. And with so many companies trying to get to net zero, the demand for offsets is going to keep rising. So relying too much on offsets can get really pricey.
So offsets are a tool, not a free pass.
Exactly. And that's what CIM is saying. They really emphasize that. Those first 4 steps: monitoring, optimization, upgrades, and renewables. Those are the most important. Offsets should only be used for those unavoidable emissions as a last resort.
Got it. So, we've covered a lot today. CIM's 5-step roadmap to net zero in commercial property. What are the key takeaways? What do we want our listener to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is reaching net zero is possible. It's a journey, but we have a roadmap. Start by understanding your building's energy use through data. Then optimize everything to be as efficient as possible. Invest in upgrades, especially electrifying your building. And finally, look into renewable energy, both on-site and off-site. Carbon offsets can be part of the solution, but use them strategically.
Makes sense. This has been a really interesting deep dive. Thanks for joining me and walking us through all of this.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
I'm feeling pretty inspired, and I hope our listeners are too.
Me too. And I'd like to leave our listeners with this thought. Every building, no matter what it is, can be part of the climate solution. We have the technology and the knowledge. We just need to take action.
Couldn't agree more. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Be sure to check out CIM's ebook. It's got tons of great info and examples. And if there's a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, let us know. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.